The muscular system is essential for the body as it has several functions. One of the main functions is movement. Muscles are tissues which contract, which then move other parts of the body. Muscles also create waste products. One example is heat, which can be used to warm up the body in cold conditions. There are intercostal muscles in the diaphragm which help with breathing. The muscle helps to expand and shrink the size of the chest cavity to facilitate breathing. Nerves and messages which allow you to breathe in and out. Force air out panting. Posture is how our body is held up. Posture muscles are found deep in the body in the pelvis, abdomen, and back. Posture muscles sustain your posture. These muscles contain slow twitch fibers. When muscles contract, they produce heat. When body temperature drops due to the cold, muscles will shiver to create heat to maintain the body's core temperature. There are two types of constrictions. They are vasodilation and vasoconstriction. Vasoconstriction is the narrowing of blood vessels. When this occurs, the blood flow is reduced to certain body tissues. Vasodilation is the opposite, therefore it's the widening of blood vessels, which means that the flow is better to the tissues. Muscle contraction requires energy and produces heat as a byproduct of metabolism. During exercise, muscle movement causes body temperature to rise. Excitability is important for a number of different functions, including movement and heat production, as it has the ability to respond to neurons, which can excite the muscles, causing them to move. This can be seen during reaction-based sports, as a muscle is excited by a motor neuron after being stimulated, causing a reaction. However, it can also be excited by hormones stimulating the muscle instead to contract and relax to produce heat when shivering, as heat is a waste product of muscles working. The next characteristic is extensibility, which is the ability for the muscle to extend for movements such as a flexion or extension, which would be helpful in sports where a lot of movement is needed. For example, rugby is the players are continuously exercising, therefore always doing movements such as flexion and extension. Elasticity is the ability of muscles to contract rapidly after and immediately prior to extension. This is important in football when the goalkeeper is extending his arm to save a shot as it is out of reach, but his arm will not remain in a position and will go back to its original state. Contractility allows muscles to forcefully contract and shorten. For example, when you flex your elbow, your biceps brachii shortens. There are three types of muscle tissue. These are skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. These muscle tissues do have similarities, but they also have many differences between them. Cardiac tissues can only be found in the heart, and its main function is to pump blood around the body. This organ is involuntary, meaning it pumps the blood around the body without you thinking about doing it. The pacemaker is used to monitor the rate the heart is beating at. The heart can beat fast under strenuous exercise or when adrenaline is produced, which causes the heart to beat extremely fast. Smooth tissue is sort of similar to cardiac tissue, as it's also under involuntary control. However, the smooth tissue isn't found in the heart but found in the tubes of the body. Skeletal tissue is the only voluntary tissue, as the brain has to send signals through the nervous system for movement to occur. A similarity between skeletal and cardiac tissue is that they are both striated, which means striped, whereas smooth tissue isn't striated. Skeletal tissue is a long cylindrical cell made of 100 of muscle fibers. Another difference between these muscle tissue is how they respire, most important in sport. For an example, smooth and cardiac tissue have slow twitch fibers, which mean they do not tire easily and will be respiring aerobically as oxygen is present. However, skeletal tissue have fast twitch fibers, which means that they can tire quickly, therefore will be respiring anaerobically as oxygen isn't present. All of this is due to the speed of contractions by the muscles, as cardiac and smooth have very slow and arithmetic contractions, whereas skeletal varies. That's why skeletal tire much faster than the other two. All three of these muscle tissues are different in size and structure. As mentioned earlier, cardiac tissue is striated. It only has one nuclei and sometimes has two nuclei. Skeletal tissue has multiple nuclei, and smooth tissue only has one nuclei. Smooth tissue is made of sheets of muscles and have actin and myosin inside. Smooth tissue obtains its energy from the hydrolysis of the ATP, which is similar to the skeletal tissue, but cardiac tissue has a high level of mitochondria which can supply the energy. Skeletal muscle tissue is organized into groups called fascicles. Fascicles are bundles of muscle fibers surrounded by perimysium. Skeletal muscle fibers are found inside of the muscle itself. Skeletal muscle is enclosed in connective tissue at three separate levels. Each muscle fiber is covered by endomysium. Endomysium is a large layer of dense irregular tissue which adheres the muscle and prevents friction against muscles and bones. And the epimysium is also connective tissue that wraps the whole muscle. Tendons are also another connective tissue that transmit the force of muscle contraction to bones. Tendons are connected firmly to the muscle fibers at one end and the other end of components of bones, as previously described, because muscles are attached to tendons. The origin is the fixed attachment whilst the insertion moves with contraction. Continuous or intense exercise can cause the muscles to tire, which is known as muscle fatigue. When performing anaerobically, fast twitch fibers are present. As the athlete is performing anaerobically, the athlete can't perform at a high level for a long time due to the fact that fast twitch fibers tire quickly. A sporting example of this is sprinting. As for slow twitch fibers, these are present when the athlete is performing aerobically, so long distance running. These don't tire as quickly as they perform at a much lower intensity, therefore will be able to perform for much longer periods of time. The force of muscle contraction is controlled by multiple motor units. There are two types of contractions: eccentric contractions and more forceful contractions. Skeletal muscles have a large supply of blood vessel branches of the nerve, and blood vessels follow the connective tissue. Agonist and antagonist muscles cause or inhibit a movement. Agonist is known as the prime mover as it provides a major force to complete the movement in the muscle. This is why the agonists are known as the prime movers. Agonist muscles cause a movement to occur through their own activation. For example, the biceps brachii contracts using the shortening contraction. When performing a push-up, and the triceps brachii is the antagonist as it is the opposing muscle to the agonist, which is the biceps brachii. Therefore, the triceps brachii will be relaxing when the biceps brachii is contracting. The synergist is the muscle which stabilizes the joint around whatever movement is occurring. The agonist functions effectively. Synergist muscles also help to create the movement. The fixator is the muscle that stabilizes the origin of the agonist and the joint that the origin moves over, which helps the agonist function properly. The origin and the insertion are both attachment sites, whether different as the origin attachment site doesn't move during contraction and the insertion attachment site does move when the muscle is contracting. The insertion is usually further away from the body, whereas the origin isn't. There are three types of muscle fibers: slow oxidative fibers, fast oxidative fibers, and finally fast glycolytic fibers. Slow oxidative fibers produce low powered contractions, whereas fast oxidative fibers produce high powered contractions. Therefore, this is why they tire much faster than slow oxidative fibers. Fast glycolytic fibers are quite similar to fast oxidative fibers, but fast glycolytic fibers have a higher blood supply and also have high levels of endurance. Slow oxidative fibers have elements that help generate ATP via aerobic metabolism, which is also the same as the fast oxidative fibers. These fibers contain a lot more mitochondria than the other fibers due to the fact aerobic metabolism occurs in the mitochondria, which uses oxygen. Fast oxidative fibers mainly use aerobic respiration to generate ATP during each metabolic cycle. More ATP can be produced, which makes the fiber more resistant to fatigue, and the diameter of these fibers is slightly larger than the other fibers. Glycolytic fibers makes their ATP via anaerobic glycolysis, which produces less ATP per cycle. Slow oxidative fibers are red as oxygen is binding with protein and myoglobin, and fast oxidative fibers appear white as myoglobin is absent and relies on the glycolytic enzymes. Both oxidative fibers have capillaries to allow gas exchange, so these fibers are working aerobically whilst performing. Also, slow oxidative fibers contain more fibers as they always respiring aerobically. However, fast glycolytic fibers have no capillaries as they always respiring anaerobically. Therefore, fast glycolytic fibers are present when the athlete is sprinting. Slow oxidative fibers are most resistant to fatigue ability as they use oxidative metabolism to produce their ATP. Fast glycolytic fibers fatigue extremely fast as no oxygen is present during the exercise, therefore the fibers are working extremely hard but can't for a long time. Fast oxidative fibers fatigue, but not as fast as glycolytic fibers, but a lot faster than the slow oxidative fibers due to the fact these would be respiring at one point aerobically and the other point will be respiring anaerobically. Therefore, the intensity will increase throughout the exercise. When a sports person responds to a stimuli, they will be taking their surroundings so they know how they can do something if it's possible to pull it off. For example, in football, if the player receives the ball in space, it will take his time to perform his action, and if, for example, a pass, he will also see what is the best option by looking around, deciding where he can pass. When he decided who to pass to a When he decided who to pass to, a stimulus will be sent from the brain. The muscle will receive information from internal or external stimuli. Then the muscle fibers are stimulated by the motor neuron, which controls them after the impulses are sent from the central nervous system. Then down neurons until it reaches the motor neuron, which releases the neurotransmitter acetylcholine into the neuromuscular junction. These are overviews. A neurotransmission is neurotransmission from one neuron or release across the synapse and attach themselves to molecules in the next neuron, which is the receptors. The receptors receive the message and process it. After this is complete, it's sent to the next neuron. Neuromuscular junctions are chemical synapses formed by the contact between the motor neuron and the muscle fiber. Silent filament theory explains the mechanism of muscle contraction based on muscle proteins that slide past each other to generate movement. The neuromuscular junctions are synapses formed by the contact between the motor neuron and the muscle fiber. As there is a motor neuron, it is able to send a signal to the muscle fiber. As the axon approaches the muscle, it divides into the branch which connects to the muscle fiber. Each muscle fiber has a singular neuromuscular junction where the axon of the neuron joins the fiber. When the signal passes the muscle fiber, it will cause the muscle to contract. Axons are a singular fiber which carries information away from the soma, which then goes to the synaptic sites of other neurons. There is a gap between the myelin sheath along the axon. The myelin sheath is an insulating layer which forms around the nerves. These myelin sheaths allow the impulse to travel quicker along the nerves. If the myelin sheath is damaged, the impulse will be slower because the insulating layer isn't working properly, therefore the impulse can't be transmitted quicker. Synapses are used to transfer electric activity between cells. There are two parts of the synapse, the presynaptic and postsynaptic synapse. The presynaptic synapse is on the axon and the postsynaptic synapse is the part on the soma. Sliding filament theory explains how muscles contract based on muscle proteins which slide past each other to generate movement. For the muscle contraction to occur, there has to be available ATP, calcium in the muscle cells, and finally a nerve stimulus. There are four main stages of the sliding filament theory, and the first stage is known as the muscle activation stage. This is where the motor nerve stimulates an impulse which is passed on a neuron to the neuromuscular junction inside the neuromuscular junction inside another neuromuscular junction. The motor neuron transmits a signal to the muscle fibers as muscles contract, which need calcium. This stimulates the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which is the membrane found in the cells, which stores calcium ions. The calcium is released into the muscle cells in themselves, which leads to the second stage, which is the muscle contraction. Calcium is already flooded into the muscle cells, which is binding with the troponin, allowing actin and myosin to also bind. The actin and myosin cross-bridges bind by the myofilaments sliding over each other during muscle contraction. The heads of the myosin filaments quickly bind and release afterwards. They pull in along the actin myofilaments. An example of an actin myofilament is the trypomyosins, which help with contraction and when muscles aren't contracting. During muscle contraction, the H zone is shortened. It becomes smaller as the actin myofilaments are constantly overlapping. As the cells contract, the entire muscles contract due to the arrangement of the thick myosin filaments across the myofibrils. This causes them to reflect light and produce a dark band known as the A band. In between the bands there is a light area where no myofilaments are present but only actin filaments, which are the thinner myofilaments. Myofilaments are found within the sarcomeres. The Z line links the sarcomeres within the muscle. The cross-bridges are also bind and contract when ATP is present, since it's an energy compound. After this ATP is resynthesized, so the actin and myosins can maintain their strength. When the stimulation of the nerve stops, relaxation occurs. When the stimulation stops, the calcium is then pumped back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum, therefore breaking the bond between the actin and myosin. When this occurs, the actin and myosin return to their unbounded state, causing the muscles to relax.